Hola muchachos! Welcome to my Spanish presentation, where I will be explaining how to use verbs in the present tense in Spanish. So, as you just saw in the previous video, the speaker talked about the usage of the box of 6 in order to separate I, you, he and she, we, you guys, and they. So just to clarify, this chart is first divided by first, second, and third person, as well as singular and plural. Now, you may be confused as to why we want to divide the different persons in this way. This is because verbs change their endings based on the subject speaker between I, you, he or she, we, you guys, and they, as well as, usted and ustedes being more formal in third person. So here's our first verb, trabajar. Translated, it means to work. Now, you should recognize from our flashcard, yo trabajo a la escuela, or I work at the school. Except I think that I got rid of that one and replaced it for something else. But the real question here would be, how do we get from trabajar to trabajo if they both have to do with working? Well, it's literally the difference between saying I work and to work. As I said before, the verb changes its ending or is conjugated based on who's doing the action. This means that the ending AR is cut off and replaced by a couple other letters. So I work would be trabajo instead of trabajar. While you work would be trabajas, and she works would be trabaja. Just to finish, we work would be trabajamos. You guys work would be trabajáis, and they work would be trabajan. So in order to form a conjugated verb out of trabajar, first you would drop the AR ending, and then add one of the following endings from the chart, based on the subject speaker. So firstly, some may ask if they can skip saying yo trabajo, and simply say trabajo to mean I work. They, in fact, can. Both forms are equally correct. As a result, Spanish speakers tend to use more trabajo, or the conjugated verb, since it is shorter. However, one may want to clarify who's doing the action when saying, my brother is working. Mi hermano trabaja means my brother works, while trabaja would only mean he works. In this case, both forms are not equal to each other, as can be seen. Now, in English, it's customary to list the speakers in the first sentence, then use a generic he or she for the next sentences, such as, my brother works, he swims in the pool. You may ask if this is the same in Spanish. It is. This phrase would translate directly to, mi hermano trabaja, nada en la piscina. Just like in English, it is generally inferred that the person swimming in the pool would be my brother, since he is the subject in the previous sentence. So now hopefully your only question left to ask is, do all verbs conjugate the same way? The answer is that while all other verbs ending in AR conjugate the same way, other verbs don't. There are 3 types of verbs in Spanish. AR verbs, which you can see these 3 here, trabajar, nadar, and esperar. But there are also ER and IR verbs. They all conjugate based on the speaker in fairly similar ways, but it's not the same. And obviously, you can tell they were very creative with the naming. We have AR verbs and in AR, ER verbs and in ER, and IR verbs and in IR, if that's already not clear. So now I'm going to show you how to conjugate ER and IR verbs. I already explained AR verbs, but here are ER verbs. Don't forget to write this chart down as well. They go as o, es, hemos, ais, and en. IR verbs conjugate almost the same way as ER verbs. They go as o, es, hemos, is, en. So basically, besides these 2 here, hemos and is, ER and IR verbs conjugate identically. Given a little practice, this should all click fairly quickly. Just to drill it in, here are examples of an ER and IR verb conjugating. In this case, I'm using comer and abrir. Comer translates as yo como, tú comes, él, ella, or usted come, nosotros or nosotros comemos, vosotros or vosotras comáis, and ellos, ellas, or ustedes comen. Abrir and all other IR verbs conjugate nearly exactly the same way, except instead of abremos, it's abrimos. Instead of abres, it's abris. You can see that I bolded and underlined this difference to make it even more clear to see. Okay, before we finish, there are many, many exceptions to verb conjugations. Before you complain, remember this is the same for English. For example, you would say I ate instead of I eated. In the same way, irregulars in Spanish can be understood to exist for that same reason, in order to avoid strange words and be more clear and concise. It is especially important to be clear when speaking Spanish, since it is the second fastest language spoken in the world, after Japanese. For the flashcards given, I have provided a few words that are irregular. They go as follows. Dar, which means to give, conjugates as doy in the first person present form. Otherwise, it conjugates normally as das, da, damos, dais, dan. Ver, which means to see, as in I see a plane or I see what's on the presentation, translates as veo in the present tense yo form. Otherwise, again, it conjugates normally as ves, ve, vamos, veis, and ven. These two conjugate this way because it would be awkward to say do or vo, just like in the ate and eated example I gave. While the above examples are complete exceptions, there are plenty of verbs that actually follow a rule when conjugating differently. For example, verbs that end in ger or gir conjugate as ho and yo form for present tense. Otherwise, again, these conjugate normally. These create conjugations such as protejo and elijo. In the end, these exceptions have to be memorized, but they are fairly intuitive once you get the hang of it. Later, we will see more irregular verbs that follow different rules for conjugation. Well, my presentation is over now. In order to practice the present tense, I have provided a worksheet so that you can conjugate AR, ER, and IR verbs. There are 2 sections. I advise you to do section 1 first, then memorize the flashcards I have provided, and then move on to section 2 and 3. In order to complete the worksheet, I recommend that you copy the conjugation charts listed in this recording onto notes and use those, since you shouldn't have conjugations memorized yet. Thanks for watching. Oh, and yeah, so again, if just copy the AR, ER, and IR charts and use those. Thank you.